past 7 years, I've grown my Turo fleet to just about 30 cars, which certainly isn't even close to the largest fleet on the Turo platform, but at the same time I've grown my Turo fleet, I've also grown multiple other businesses, generating close to 7 figures per year. And here are the 6 most important things that I've learned about growing my fleet, my income, and other businesses over the past 7 years. The first tip that I have is diversification. When I was younger, I remember hearing about entrepreneurs talking about how you should focus on one thing, and that if you want to get rich, you should really learn how to do one thing very, very well, and then hyper-focus on that and scale. I actually have a fundamentally different belief to this. And to be honest, I think most extremely successful people do as well. Because if you look at insanely successful people, they more often than not have multiple things going on. For example, look at Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, even massive CEOs who aren't founders are doing multiple things. For example, Ford CEO Jim Farley is the CEO of Ford, but he also serves on the board of Harley. Whenever I think about what brought my income from $1,000 per month to $30,000 per month, that was Turo and car sharing. But whenever I think about what brought my income from 30 grand per month to 70 grand per month, that was diversification. My husband and I have Turo, Outdoorsy, YouTube, content creation, real estate, and I have a corporate job. And as I record this video, I have 3 other businesses and products that I'm currently working on that I haven't even talked about on this channel that should help bring us from that $70,000 per month to $100,000 per month mark. Diversification has not only literally 10x my income in a relatively short period of time, but it's also allowed for me to continue to scale my fleet at a pace that I want without having to take on investors or debt. It's allowed for me to invest in appreciating assets like houses. It's also allowed for me to feel confident to go out and try new things and invest into new ideas I have, because I know that if the tap was to run dry tomorrow on any one of my ideas, I would be fine. Not to mention my quality of life is just better and more fun. When it comes to diversification and the Turo fleet, there are a number of ways that you can skin this cat. You can start out with Turo and then also just keep your full-time job that you had prior to starting a Turo fleet. This is a great place to start. Use Turo as your passive or semi-passive side hustle, and then use your time to make money elsewhere, like with your job. And then as your Turo fleet continues to grow, you could add other income streams on top of that. For example, I personally know a Turo host that had a Turo fleet and a corporate job for a very long time, and then just recently he added a detailing company to that as well. I also know a host who flips houses in conjunction with growing his Turo fleet. And I know many Turo hosts that have kept their full-time job while growing their Turo fleet to even dozens and dozens of cars. Diversification while growing a Turo fleet is absolutely possible, and it's something that I highly recommend exploring. The one thing that I do want you to keep in mind is that diversification takes time. As I sit here today, I have a lot of different ways that I make money, but this took a long time to implement, and you really do have to be patient. The second piece of advice that I have is that you have to, and I mean must, detach emotionally from your Turo fleet and from your business as a whole. I have run into everything you can imagine with the Turo fleet. Cars stolen, guests refusing to extend, total losses, lawsuits, someone recently peed in a car. You have to be able to detach your emotions from running a Turo fleet, and in my opinion, this is simply a non-negotiable. I'm on Turo Facebook groups, and I can't tell you how many times I see posts from people stating things and asking questions like, is this a red flag? I'm so upset with my guest. Turo is running me over. I see these types of posts every single day, and what these posts typically do have in common is that the host is upset with something that either the guest did with their car or something that Turo is doing to them. But you just can't have this mindset. It is very literally going to drive you crazy. I very literally do not care what happens with my cars. I don't care if my cars get totaled, if they get smoked in, if they don't get returned. In fact, as I'm recording this video, one of my cars is currently MIA. The guest did not return it, and while we do actually know where the car is because there's trackers on there, the guest is refusing to return, and I'm currently coordinating the process of getting the car towed back. But despite the fact that this is inconvenient, I haven't lost a minute of sleep due to it. The thought process that I have is that I have so much faith in me, my husband HP, and our employee to follow the Turo terms of service that even if a worst case scenario happens, we are going to be protected. And I'm a big believer in just worrying about what you can actually control. And whenever it comes to the aspects of a Turo fleet that we can control, it comes down to things like following the terms of service, taking good photos, making sure cars are well maintained, but pretty much anything outside of that, certainly anything within the own decisions of the Turo guest, that's something that's out of my control, and I'm just not going to stress about it. Now, the thing about caring about your business is that you actually can't not care about your business. You do have to care about your cars, making a profit, and providing a good guest experience, because that's just part of running a successful business. But you can't get emotionally attached to when cars get damaged, when they'll get returned, when they get smoked in. This is where you're setting yourself up for failure. You need to get to the point where you know the Turo Turo process inside and out that you can go through this process without letting a shred of emotion affect that process. For example, the guest that I just mentioned a moment ago that is refusing to return my car. I messaged the guest, asked for an ETA, he didn't respond, I went into the app, reported it as late, and today I'm simply just waiting for Turo to call me with an update about the tow. Now, obviously, this is a pain in the butt, don't get me wrong, but it's not something that I am getting emotionally invested in. The third piece of advice that I have is do not meet guests in person. I will die on this hill, but in order to grow a fleet and maintain a level of freedom from Turo, you have to do remote key exchanges. In fact, I would argue that this is the predominant reason I've been able to grow my Turo fleet simultaneously to growing these other businesses. Meeting a guest in person, either upon pickup or return of the vehicle, is a complete time suck and it's a huge waste of time. You should learn remote key exchanges and you should feel comfortable doing remote key exchanges, and you should be doing remote key exchanges for every single rental. And the argument that I have against remote key exchanges is more often than not the argument that people treat your car better whenever you meet them in person, you introduce yourself. And while I actually do think that this is true, you have to take into account the cost of that because your time is money. Guests are late all the time, they're early all the time, they change their plans constantly. By doing remote key exchanges, we've been able to also just provide a better guest experience as well. For example, it is extremely common for guests to extend their trips very last minute. It's also super common for guests to be very late picking up the cars. With remote key exchanges, a guest could be an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours late picking up the car, and not only will we not report that to Turo because the guest has communicated to us that they are picking it up, but we also don't personally care either because we gave them the lockbox code and they're good to go. Whenever they pick it up is totally up to them. I strongly believe that meeting guests in person is just a complete and utter waste of time. And I oftentimes do hear the argument of, well, my car is nice and I need to do a walkthrough with the guest, or my car has some quirks and I really need to meet the guests and give them a tour. And I would argue that if you have a car that requires for you to be there in person when the guest picks that car up, then you've probably chosen the wrong car for Turo. Now, obviously, this is a little bit different if you are somebody who's just casually doing Turo and you're not really wanting to turn it into a real scalable business. But if you are wanting to grow and scale Turo, then this is something I feel very strongly about. Number 4 is track your money. I am such a firm believer in tracking your spending. I use Rocket Money for my personal finances and I use QuickBooks for my business finances, and I can tell you pretty close to the dollar how much I spend and make each and every month. And I can also tell you how easily your spending can get out of control if you're not tracking your spending. If you're a Turo host and you feel like you're not making as much money as you could be, then you must track your spending. In fact, I would encourage you to track both personal and business expenses. I'm a big fan of financial audits. I watch a lot of Caleb Hammer and even Dave Ramsey, and the amount of people who say, yeah, I'm just not making enough money to live and I'm cutting out everything I can, but then whenever you go through their statements, you see Amazon, fast food, miscellaneous crap. These types of poor spending habits will trickle down into Turo or really into any business at all. I would be willing to bet almost anything that if you are someone who is currently not tracking your spending and you begin to track every dollar that you spend, both business-wise and personally, I would be willing to bet that not only will you be surprised by the results, but you will end up having more money in your pocket after you begin doing this after a few months. There is no excuse to not track your spending. End of story. On a similar topic is advice number 5, which is do not accumulate debt, or at least be very cautious about the debt that you do accumulate. Bad debt will drown you. And I recognize that there is a belief that in order to properly use your finances and take advantage of all of your resources available to you, you should use other people's money in order to grow your own money. And thus, with this mindset, taking out debt can make sense. But the problem is, I think that this advice is taken out of context in the context of Turo. Using other people's money in order to make money is a fine mindset whenever it's an appreciating asset like a house. But cars are, in most cases, depreciating assets, and debt situations are much different with depreciating assets than appreciating ones. And while credit cards aren't even in this line of thinking at all, which is something that I do hear about in the context of Turo. I get extremely nervous when I hear about Turo hosts trying to figure out ways to expand their fleet using debt and debt alone. For example, I get asked quite frequently my thoughts of using low interest or 0% interest promotion credit cards to grow a Turo fleet. Turo is such a high ROI business model that it is actually possible to use a 0% interest credit card to buy a car that costs maybe $5,000. You rent that card on Turo and you may be able to pay off that credit card within that 0% interest period of time. Based on the numbers and how a Turo card could potentially perform, this is possible. But in my opinion, you are very literally playing with fire. You can start a Turo fleet with $5,000. Instead of asking yourself, how can you use debt to get that $5,000, we should be asking ourselves, what do we have to do to make that additional $5,000 to fund that Turo car? This is the exact mindset that I had with my Turo fleet whenever I was first starting out, and I'm so glad that I did because it allowed for me to grow my Turo fleet debt-free. There are so many ways to make $5,000. Going on Upwork and freelancing, driving for rideshare services, pet sitting on Rover, mowing lawns, cleaning pools, babysitting, or even just getting a part-time job for a couple of months. There are literally dozens, if not hundreds of different ways to make $5,000. Instead of using a 0% interest credit card to go out and buy that $5,000 car, go and get a side hustle. Sure, it's more work, but it's so much safer, and once you get that first $5,000 car, you can then rinse and repeat the process for the next one, and then eventually you can stop the side hustle altogether. I've been on YouTube for a very long time now, and people often forget that I wasn't always in the position that I'm in today. And people tell me quite frequently, oh, you only are successful at Turo because your husband's good with cars, or oh, you can only buy your cars debt-free because you make a lot of money. And people forget that when I started Turo, I was 23 years old, my then boyfriend was working full-time at a dealership, I was on the verge of bankruptcy due to an unrelated business closing, and I worked 60 plus hours a week at a side hustle to buy my fleet debt-free. And my sixth and final piece of advice is probably also my most controversial one, and that is that you have the time. One of the hardest things about nearly everything that I've included in this list is just having the time to do it. And I'm going to make the blanket statement here, but I think in most cases, you probably do have the time. One of my life principles is that if something is important enough, you'll make the time to do it. There was a study done a few years ago, and the study was done on working moms who basically were like, yeah, my time is capped. Like, I have no more time to do anything else in the day other than what I'm currently doing. And these were working moms, they had kids, so they no doubt had an extremely busy schedule. And what they did is they took a portion of these working moms that claimed that their schedule was jam-packed, it had no room for anything else, and they started assigning more tasks to these working moms who were already extremely busy. And what they found is that the moms that had more and more work to do, they basically found a way to make it work without sacrificing any of the other work. And basically what the study found was that highly productive people find ways to fit new things in their schedule without sacrificing the other things that are important. So basically coming to the conclusion that even if you don't think that you have the time, you probably do. I think similar to tracking your spending, if you find that at the end of the day, you just can't get everything you want to get done in a day, or you find yourself saying, yeah, I'd love to do X, but I just don't have the time, you should track your time. I consider myself to be an extremely busy person, almost to a fault, and I am personally going through a pretty big time management shift myself, and it is something that I've been struggling with a bit over the last couple of weeks due to the fact that I recently changed my corporate job. I was offered a corporate job with a new company and in a new position after working my previous corporate job for over 6 years. And I took this new job not only because it was higher paying, but it also just offered more learning opportunities and personal growth. And one thing that I've no doubt struggled with since I took this new job is time management. In my old position, I was almost on autopilot. I knew what I had to do each and every week like the back of my hand. I knew that Mondays was my meeting days, Tuesdays was my catch-up days, and then the next 3 days had their specific roles as well. I knew where I could fit in recording videos for YouTube, working on the Turo fleet, working on content, and planning new business ideas while also getting everything I needed to get done for my corporate job completed. But with this new role, everything has sort of changed, including the days and times that I work, what the expectations are with the role, and the things that I need to get completed on a day-by-day basis. And so I'm going back to the drawing board and I'm saying, okay, how does everything or when does everything need to get done? I'm not telling myself, okay, what do I need to offload? What do I need to say no to? Or what do I need to stop doing? Instead, I'm asking myself what needs to be delegated. Do I need to hire someone? Can HP take a task for me? Or do I need to simply just wake up an hour earlier? I think that when it comes to time management, people need to stop thinking about why they can't get something done, and they instead should be thinking about how they can get it completed. And I kind of think that this goes back to the diversification and the debt point of earlier. You can diversify your income, you can have the time to get a side hustle and buy a car debt-free, and you have the time to track your spending. But chances are you're just not prioritizing it. I think that if you're someone who feels as though you're just not able to catch up, you're not getting enough done in the day, and you're unhappy with how much you're accomplishing at the end of the week, I would highly encourage you to track your time hour by hour. I find that whenever I'm struggling with time management and I go through this exercise, I oftentimes discover that I'm diddling around more than I think I am. For example, scrolling through my phone more often than I realize, or looking at TikTok for a lot longer than I had actually planned to. Even things like letting my sleep schedule slip a bit and waking up 30 minutes or an hour later than I really should be waking up. And while this does apply to the diversification and debt topics of earlier, this absolutely also applies to Turo. If you find that you don't have the time to grow a Turo fleet or to manage a couple of cars, and that's something you want to do, you should reevaluate how efficiently you're using your time, because chances are there are things that you can move around. Maybe you're spending too much time cleaning cars. Maybe you're driving too far to the local car wash or to the local gas station. Maybe you're doing too many liveries, meeting too many guests in person. I know from firsthand experience that there are a lot of segments of running and managing a Turo fleet that can result in wasted time. And I'm not saying that everybody needs to work 80 hours per week or that everybody needs to make their work or side hustle their life, because that certainly isn't the case. But I do think that regardless of what path you end up pursuing, you need to be realistic with where that path could end up. And that if you're not doing something under the idea that you don't have the time to do it, I have found that more often than not, this is just simply priorities issue, which is fine if that is the case, but it's important to recognize what it actually is. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.